Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. You're watching Al24 News live from Algiers. Coming up next in our World News program. As concern rises that Russia is preparing to attack Ukraine, Secretary of State Antony Blinken stated the United States is not bending to major demands by Russian President Vladimir Putin. Plus, Afghanistan is hanging by a thread. United Nations Secretary Antonio Guterres told the Security Council, calling for countries to authorize all transactions needed to carry out humanitarian activities in the Taliban-ruled state. Also coming up in our World News program, Woodside is withdrawing from strife-torn Myanmar a year after then Chief Executive Peter Coleman drew flag for sympathizing with the generals who staged a coup in February 2021. And Liberal U.S. Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer will retire later this year after nearly 3 decades on the bench. His decision ensures President Joe Biden will have an opportunity to nominate a successor who could serve for decades. Thank you for joining us, and we start with this developing story. The United States has given Moscow its written response aimed at preventing a Russian invasion of Ukraine. Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced hours after Russia threatened further aggression. Marwa Bilawar on what followed.
After Russia had issued a written list of its demands about the expansion of the NATO military alliance and related security issues, and after the talks in Geneva between Moscow and Washington, Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced that the United States has delivered a written response to Russia addressing Moscow's security demands. The US has rejected Russia's demand to bar Ukraine from NATO amid warnings Russia might invade its neighbor.
I told Foreign Minister Lavrov that the United States would do the same. Today, Ambassador Sullivan delivered our written response in Moscow. All told, it sets out a serious diplomatic path forward, should Russia choose it. The document we've delivered includes concerns of the United States and our allies and partners about Russia's actions that undermine security, a principled and pragmatic evaluation of the concerns that Russia has raised, and our own proposals for areas where we may be able to find common ground. We make clear that there are core principles that we are committed to uphold and defend, including Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and the right of states to choose their own security arrangements and alliances.
Earlier, before the U.S. delivers its letter to Russia, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov threatened further aggression if the document did not satisfy its country.
We and our colleagues from other departments will draft our proposals addressed to President Putin regarding further steps. We won't let our projects drown in endless discussions.
The U.S. envoy to Russia, John Sullivan, transferred the U.S. written response to Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Alexander Grushko in half-hour meeting. The Russian minister said his country would study Blinken's response delivered in coordination with NATO. Blinken said that NATO plans to deliver its own document to Russia that fully reinforces the U.S. written response and outlines ideas and concerns about collective security in Europe. The document remains unclear about whether it will de-escalate the tense security situation along the Russia-Ukraine border, as Washington has already rolled out Moscow's major requests.
In Ukraine, local police announced that a National Guard soldier has shot security guards at a military factory in the center of the country, killing 5 people and injuring 5 others before fleeing. A police statement said the incident took place in the early hours of Thursday at a Pivden Mash missile factory in the central city of Dnipro. While the reasons for the incident are still unknown, the soldier has fled and the police are now looking for him. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres told the Security Council on Wednesday that Afghanistan is hanging by a thread, calling for countries to authorize all transactions needed to carry out humanitarian activities in the Taliban-ruled state. Miriam Zian reports.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged the international community to provide humanitarian aid to Afghanistan in order to preserve lives.
We urge the Taliban to seize this moment and garner international trust and goodwill by recognizing and upholding the basic human rights that belong to every girl and woman.
He also called for the suspension of any restrictions for life-saving relief operations, citing the fact that millions of people in the country are starving and that education and social services are on the brink of collapse. In the same line, the UN Secretary General also encouraged the Taliban to respect women's and children's fundamental human rights.
We urge the Taliban to seize this moment and garner international trust and goodwill by recognizing and upholding the basic human rights that belong to every girl and woman.
Mahbouba Sarraj, Afghan women human rights defender, shared her perspective on the situation in Afghanistan as an Afghan American.
And today in Afghanistan, women are literally being erased from the public life, down to the beheading of the female mannequins in the shops' windows. Today we'll focus on the responsibility of the Security Council, the UN, and the international community for keeping Afghan women's rights front and center throughout all the deliberation on Afghanistan.
Since the Taliban took power in August, $9.5 billion in Afghan central bank deposits have been frozen outside the country, and international backing for the former governments has dried up.
I appeal to the international community to step up support for the people of Afghanistan, including by realizing aid funds in Washington that remained frozen by the World Bank and the US government.
Taliban officials met with Western leaders in Oslo recently to discuss the humanitarian issue with Western diplomats, connecting humanitarian help to improvements in human rights in Afghanistan.
Are really increasing. I bring some fresh reports from talks in Oslo in recent days between Taliban leadership and civil society in Afghanistan, and also delegations from the international community, about the key issues: access for humanitarian aid, access for humanitarian organizations, critical issues of enlarging political participation in Afghanistan, and also singular issues such as bringing girls back to school according to obvious human rights for Afghans.
The United Nations requested $4.4 billion in humanitarian aid for Afghanistan earlier this month in 2022 and announced on Wednesday that it needed an additional $3.6 billion for health and education, basic infrastructure, livelihood enhancement, and social cohesion, with a focus on the needs of women and girls.
French President Emmanuel Macron launched on Wednesday an important initiative towards the French who moved to France after Algeria's War of Independence, considering that the shooting in Isly streets in Algiers in March 1962 was an unforgivable incident for the French Republic. In a speech at the Élysée Palace, Macron stressed that the massacre of July the 5th, 1962 in Oran, Algeria, which was committed hours after the official declaration of Algeria's independence, which claimed the lives of hundreds of Europeans, primarily French, must be recognized. Macron said the French soldiers opened fire on that day on the French, describing what happened as a massacre, adding that France, after 60 years, recognizes this tragedy.
Il y a 60 ans, les rapatriés d'Algérie ne furent pas écoutés.
16 years later, France recognizes this tragedy, and I say it today, loud and clear. The massacre of the 26th of March 1962 is unforgettable to the French Republic.
Australian energy giant Woodside has announced it is withdrawing from Myanmar almost 1 year after the military seized power in an illegal coup. The company has been under intense pressure over its involvement in a major deep-water gas development, which activists said would pour millions of dollars into the pockets of the military junta, while the company puts its operations in Myanmar on hold around 11 months ago. It will now begin to withdraw from its remaining exploration contracts with the state-held Myanmar Oil and Gas Enterprise, MOGE. Liberal U.S. Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer will retire later this year after nearly 3 decades on the bench. His decision ensures President Joe Biden will have an opportunity to nominate a successor who could serve for decades. Sofiane Kenturi reports.
President Joe Biden and Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer will appear together at the White House on Thursday to announce Breyer's retirement. Breyer is the one of 3 surviving liberal justices on the court, and his decision to retire after more than 27 years on the bench allow Biden to pick a replacement, who might serve for decades while keeping the existing 6-3 split between conservative and liberal justice in the short term.
It has always been the decision of any Supreme Court justice, if and when they decide to retire, and how they want to announce it, and that remains the case today.
Breyer is the court's oldest member, at the age of 83. For months, liberal activists had pressured him to step down while Democrats control both the White House and the Senate, a situation that could alter after the November midterm elections.
But I've learned over time that everyone on the court, of course, wants everyone to agree with them about everything all the time.
They claimed that despite her history of health issues, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg stayed on too long and should have stepped down during the Obama administration.
In Honduras, the new president Xiomara Castro will be sworn in today. This comes while Honduras faces a political split as rival congressional leadership teams convened 2 simultaneous competing sessions after the new Congress was scheduled to open its first session. More with Nabil Khazini.
In Honduras, the president-elect Xiomara Castro is due to be sworn in today, but the first female president in the country faces big challenges. The South American country is facing a crisis over who will be the head of the newly elected Congress. Pressure has been growing to find a way out of a political impasse that resulted in 2 rival congressional leadership teams. This has generated tension and fears of a new political crisis.
We have to find a balance in order to stop this fire from spreading. Right now it's manageable, and if we don't seek out a solution, we are going to get burned.
With 51% of the vote share and 1.7 million votes, Xiomara Castro, a democratic socialist, gained the largest number of votes in the country's history, marking an end to the 12 years ruling of the previous president, Juan Orlando Hernández, from the Conservative National Party. Castro, wife of the former president Manuel Zelaya, faces the tough task of resolving Honduras' socio-economic crisis. Around 71% of Hondurans live in poverty, and the country also faces violence originating from the gangs of drug traffickers.
Out with the death squads, out with corruption, out with drug trafficking and organized crime. No more poverty and misery. To victory. People always united. Together we are going to transform this country.
The new president in Honduras is expected to lean to some Asian countries during her presidential mandate, after she had initially implied she could have closer ties to Beijing during her campaign. Honduras is one of only 14 countries with formal diplomatic relations with Taiwan. Castro expressed her gratitude for the support she received from Taiwan and hoped to continue diplomatic relations.
According to Norwegian researchers, COVID-19 was likely significantly more common in Europe and throughout the world before a first formal diagnosis. A positive coronavirus result was found in a blood sample collected from a pregnant lady on December the 12th, according to scientists at Akershus University Hospital near Oslo, who believe she was infected toward the end of November or the beginning of December. And for more news about COVID-19, let's follow this report by Sid Islam.
Moderna has begun a mid-stage trial to test a booster dose of its COVID-19 vaccine, which is specifically designed to target the Omicron coronavirus strain, just 1 day after competitor Pfizer began a similar experiment, while a 3rd dose of the company's original coronavirus vaccine raised neutralizing antibodies against the variation at the lower dose. Their levels fell 6 months after the booster dose was given. Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said on Wednesday evening that Denmark will lift all COVID-19 restrictions within the country and it will be completely open from February 1st. On Wednesday, trucks with banners and speakers proclaiming the free and safe COVID-19 vaccine visited major marketplaces in Abuja, followed by health personnel in vans ready to vaccinate people. While Nigeria is experiencing a new wave of COVID-19 infections, mainly due to the development of the Omicron form, authorities in the capital have initiated a new drive to vaccinate more people in Africa's most populated country, with mobile units visiting various locations. Comply with CDC and New York State Health Department advice. The New York City school system has reduced the COVID-19 isolation period for students in kindergarten and above who test positive for the virus from 10 to 5 days.
To Europe now, and it appears to be a strong possibility that European dishonesty over personal data privacy might continue indefinitely at a time when unlawful data storage was ordered by Europol to mass delete personal information. Islam Seed reports.
Unlawful mass surveillance and bulk data mining by Europol and member states, according to Dewey Korf, Emeritus Professor of International Law at London Metropolitan University and associate at the Oxford Martin School. Europol's widespread acquisition of personal data of European citizens in violation of GDPR standards has shown suspicions.
This is about the desire of Europol and EU member states to collect, in a generalized manner, vast stores of personal data on overwhelming innocent people, without regard for the inherent serious dangers and deficiencies in data mining technologies, and in clear breach of EU law. It has become clear through subsequent investigations and exposures.
Another reminder about the revelations by Edward Snowden about NCA and GCHQ mass surveillance activities strongly influenced by the development of the European General Data Protection Regulation, which is now widely regarded as the blueprint and global standards for personal privacy protection throughout the world. Since initiating an inquiry in 2019, the EDPS has calculated that the size of Europol's data lake surpasses 4 petabytes.
That the hovering up of data, especially e-communications data in bulk, by the US National Security Agency, NSA, working closely with its UK counterpart, the UK Government Communications Headquarters, GCHQ, was precisely for the above purposes to analyze and filter the massive data sets in order to try and to seek out to identify individuals who might be involved in nefarious activities or who just might be of interest for political or other purposes.
Europol will have to remove sections of its data lake and regulate the remainder as a result of the EDPS's decision. The judgment states that any action against a decision of the EDPS can be filed before the Court of Justice of the European Union within 2 months. If Europol can delay things long enough, its current unlawful operations may become legal and it will be free to keep on as before.
And now it's time for some economic news in this report by Nabil Khazini.
The US economy grew at its fastest rate since 1972, at the end of 2021. Official Commerce Department figures show the US economy grow at an annual rate of 6.9% in the last 3 months of last year. The new economic boost in the USA contracted to 3.4% growth in 2020, the biggest drop in 74 years. Following an improvement in international travel and domestic spending through its cards rose and cross-border volumes grew, Mastercard Inc. beat quarterly profit expectations. Mastercard's net revenue rose 27% to $5.2 billion, a number above a previously estimation of $5.16 billion. A Luxembourg-based EU General Court cancelled a €1.06 billion fine against Intel company over antitrust matters. This comes following a year-long legal battle. The EU had accused the US technology giant of trying to block competition. The Commission also accused the company of paying German chain Media Saturn to only sell computers with Intel processors, eliminating rivals in a key European market. Despite a boost in McDonald's sales, the company's profits were behind expectations. In the fourth quarter, US sales jumped 7.5%, but still, the company's reports of $6 billion in revenue fell short of analyst expectations. Internationally, in China, sales at stores open at least 13 months fell in the third quarter because of a resurgence of the coronavirus. In Australia, sales were flat to the quarter because of COVID-related government restrictions. Sales grew in international markets with fewer pandemic-related restaurant closures, like France, the United Kingdom, Italy, and Germany.
And now it's time to have an overview about the major news around the world in this report.
Deborah Lyons, Special Representative of the Secretary General and head of the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan, gave an overview of recent events in Afghanistan, emphasizing the UN's principal goal to ease the severe humanitarian situation as much as possible this winter. The United Nations Special Envoy for Afghanistan told the Council there is a compelling evidence of an emerging environment for intimidation and a worsening in respect for human rights.
The Malian government expressed surprise at Danish Foreign Minister Jeppe Kofod's statement on Tuesday that the troops were there on a clear invitation because the decision on the Danish request to deploy troops in June was still pending. The Malian government stated that no agreement allows the deployment of Danish special soldiers to the Takuba task force.
The Economic Community of West African States will convene digitally on Friday to examine the issue in Burkina Faso, where army troops removed President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore, according to the organization. Burkina Faso is among the 15 members of the Economic Community of West African States who had previously condemned Monday's coup, which occurred amid growing discontent about Kabore's reaction to armed group attacks.
6 young people are suing the operator of Japan's damaged Fukushima nuclear plant, claiming they developed thyroid cancer as a result of radiation exposure following the plant's meltdown. The plaintiffs, who are currently between the ages of 17 and 27, were residing in the Fukushima region on March 11, 2011, when a massive earthquake created a tsunami that resulted in the nuclear accident.
To some sports news now, to the African Cup of Nations in Cameroon, where Falaye Sako missed the decisive penalty for Mali in the shootouts as Equatorial Guinea won it 6-5 to move into the AFCON quarterfinals. After 120 minutes of goalless action, it was a shootout full of drama, with Pablo Guénet seeing his effort that would have sent Equatorial Guinea through saved. Both sides then held their nerves as it went to the 8 takers when Mali's centre-back Sako saw his team effort saved by Jesus Owono. Equatorial Guinea is the last team to book their place in the last 8, where they will face Senegal. And finally, Mohamed Salah scored the winning penalty as Egypt beat Ivory Coast 5-4 in the shootout to reach the Africa Cup of Nations quarterfinals. A match with plenty of intensity and half chances failed to produce a goal in 120 minutes, leaving it to be settled from the penalty spot. After 2 perfect penalties from each side, Eric Bailey stepped up. He opted for an incredibly short run-up before sending a tame effort at Gabaski, who tipped it onto the woodwork. No other player missed setting up the chance for Salah to be the hero, and he made no mistake. Egypt will face Morocco in the last quarter-finals of the Africa Cup of Nations on Sunday, the 30th of January. That's all for me, Nadia Kasmi, and the rest of the team. The news continues on Al 24 News. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.